Think about something you used to love. Maybe it was painting. Maybe it was playing guitar until your fingers hurt. Maybe it was losing yourself in a book on a Sunday afternoon, completely forgetting the world existed. Maybe it was running, or cooking, or writing, or dancing alone in your room when nobody was watching. Now, think about the last time you actually did that thing. Not the last time you told yourself you would. Not the last time you opened the app, or picked up the brush, or pulled out the notebook. The last time you actually did it, and felt something. For a lot of people, that memory is further away than they want to admit. And here's the part that nobody talks about. It is not that you got too busy. It is not that you grew out of it. It is not even that life got complicated. It is that somewhere along the way, the thing that used to feel like freedom started to feel like work. And you do not know why. And that confusion is slowly eating at you. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not even depressed necessarily. You are someone whose inner world went through something that your conscious mind never fully processed. And the loss of joy you are feeling right now is not a personality flaw. It is a signal, a message from the deepest part of you, trying to get your attention. This video is not going to give you a 5-step plan to rediscover your hobbies. That is not what this is. This is an excavation. We are going to go underneath the surface of what you think happened, into the psychological architecture of why joy disappears, where it actually goes, and what it is trying to protect you from. Because here is the truth nobody has told you yet. Joy does not leave you. You learn to leave it first. Let us start with what it actually felt like. You know that feeling when you were a child, or even a teenager, or maybe just younger, when you did that thing you loved and time simply stopped existing. You were not thinking about how it looked. You were not thinking about whether you were good at it. You were not calculating the outcome or the audience or the point of it all. You were just inside it, completely, effortlessly. Psychologists call this state flow. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi spent decades studying it. He described it as a state where the challenge of the task and your level of skill are perfectly matched, and the result is total absorption. Your brain quiets. Your sense of self dissolves. Time bends. But here is what Csikszentmihalyi also found, the part that gets left out of the motivational posters. Flow requires psychological safety. It requires a version of you that is not being watched, not being judged, not calculating the distance between who you are and who you think you should be. And at some point in your life, something happened. Maybe it was gradual, maybe it was sudden, but something introduced an observer into your experience, a voice, a set of eyes, an expectation. And the moment that happened, flow became harder to access. And the thing you loved started to feel slightly different, slightly heavier, slightly less like yours. This is where it begins. Stage 1, when joy was pure when you were young, before the world had fully handed you its definitions of success and failure. You did not experience your passions the way you do now. You did not paint because you wanted to be a painter. You painted because the colors moved something inside you that had no other language. You did not write because you wanted to be a writer. You wrote because the words held something that the real world could not contain. You did not sing because you wanted to applause. You sang because it felt like breathing. Natural, necessary. That is the original relationship with joy. Pre-social, pre-performance, pure inner resonance. Carl Jung had a concept he called the inner child, not in the sentimental way people use it on social media. In a far more serious psychological sense, he believed that buried beneath all the layers of who you have become, there exists a version of you that never stopped being curious, never stopped craving beauty, never lost its ability to be moved. That version of you is still in there. It has not gone anywhere, but it has gone quiet. Because somewhere in your development, the world began to respond to your joy. And that response changed everything. You remember the first time someone had an opinion about your thing. Maybe a parent said, very casually, that tone that adults use when they think they are being helpful, that you should focus on something more practical. Maybe a teacher graded your creative writing and handed it back with corrections that felt like small surgical incisions into something personal. Maybe a friend laughed. Maybe nobody said anything at all, which sometimes hurts worse, because silence can feel like indifference, and indifference can feel like irrelevance. And your nervous system registered that moment. It filed it, not consciously, not in the part of your brain that forms explicit memories with dates and narratives attached. It filed it in the body, in the chest, in the throat, in the subtle physical language of tension. This is what neuroscientists call an encoded threat response. Your brain, which is fundamentally a prediction machine designed to keep you alive, began to associate your passion with the possibility of pain. Not always dramatically, sometimes barely noticeably, a slight hesitation before picking up the brush, a slight self-consciousness that was not there before, a slight calculation where calculation had never existed. And little by little, the pure thing became complicated. Stage 2. The arrival of the mask. Here is where it gets interesting, because what you did next was not weakness. It was genius. It was the most sophisticated kind of psychological adaptation a person can perform. You built an armor around your joy. For some people, that armor looks like perfectionism. You decided that if you were going to do your thing, you were going to do it flawlessly, because flawlessness cannot be criticized. You practiced obsessively. You studied. You compared yourself to masters. And in trying to make the thing perfect, you slowly strangled the very spontaneity that made it feel alive in the first place. For others, the armor looks like distance. You stopped doing the thing as often. You found reasons. You told yourself you were busy, which was true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that the thing had started to feel dangerous in a way you could not name. And for some, the armor looks like performance. You kept doing the thing, but now it was for an audience. You chased external validation. You posted it. You shared it. You needed the response. And when the response was good, it felt like relief, not joy. There is a difference. Relief is the absence of pain. Joy is the presence of something electric and alive. You had drifted from joy into relief. And the gap between those two things is where the love goes to die. This is what Jung called the persona, the social mask we construct to navigate the world, the version of ourselves that is curated, careful, and optimized for approval. It is not false exactly. It contains real parts of you, but it is not the whole you. And when your passion gets pulled into the persona, when your creative expression becomes a performance instead of an experience, something essential gets lost. The activity is still happening, but the aliveness inside it is gone. And you felt that. You felt the hollowness of it. Maybe you could not name it, but you felt it. And so you did what any reasonable person does when something that used to feel good starts to feel hollow. You stopped. Not all at once. Gradually. The way a fire goes out, not because someone blows it out, but because nobody fed it. The sessions got shorter. The weeks between them got longer. The equipment collected dust. The notebook stayed closed. And you told yourself a story about it. You said you were in a season of life where there was not room for it. You said you would come back to it. You said someday. And here you are. Stage 3. The architecture of anhedonia. There is a word psychologists use called anhedonia. It means the inability to feel pleasure from activities that used to bring joy. It is often discussed in the context of depression, and yes, it lives there. But it also exists on a spectrum that has nothing to do with clinical diagnosis. You can be perfectly functional, reasonably okay, going through your days without crisis, and still be living in a mild state of anhedonia, a quiet, chronic flatness, a sense that the things you do are fine but not felt, that life has color, but you are somehow viewing it through slightly smudged glass. This is not a chemical failure. This is the result of a long, slow process of emotional armor building that your nervous system undertook to protect you from pain. And here's the part that is genuinely difficult to hear. The anhedonia is not the problem. The anhedonia is the solution. It was the answer your psyche arrived at when experiencing joy started to feel too vulnerable, too exposed, too likely to lead somewhere that hurt. If you do not care deeply about the thing, you cannot be devastated when it is taken from you, criticized, or deemed not good enough. If you keep yourself at a slight emotional distance from everything, you stay safe. This is social survival at its most sophisticated. And it works. It absolutely works. Until it does not. Until the safety starts to feel like a prison. Until you look around one day and realize that nothing feels like anything anymore, and you cannot remember the last time you were genuinely excited, genuinely lost in something, genuinely alive. Nietzsche wrote about what he called ressentiment, a French word he used deliberately because it carried a particular psychological flavor. It refers to a specific kind of inner resentment that builds up when a person continually suppresses their authentic drives and desires in order to conform to external expectations. When the things you want and the things you allow yourself to have are in chronic misalignment, a kind of inner poison builds. You do not direct it outward necessarily. Often, you direct it inward, towards your own dreams, toward the version of yourself that still wants things. You begin to resent your own desires, and one of the most common ways that resentment expresses itself is by quietly extinguishing the joy you once felt. It is not sabotage in the way people mean it when they say, "Stop self-sabotaging." It is more subtle than that. It is your psyche editing out the parts of your experience that feel like they require too much of you, that feel too risky, that feel like they expose something you have learned to protect. Stage 4. What you were really protecting here is the question that lives at the center of all of this. What were you protecting? Because this is not random. The joy did not disappear for no reason. When something as fundamental as passion goes quiet, there is always a reason underneath it, and it is almost never the one you think. You might think it disappeared because you got older, but that is not it. Age does not erase desire. Age does not eliminate the ability to experience beauty or absorption or creative electricity. Adults who maintain their relationship with joy do not do so because they are special. They do so because they either never had their joy threatened in the particular way that yours was, or because they did the deep internal work of understanding what happened. You might think it disappeared because you failed at something, because you tried to go further with the thing and it did not work out. Maybe you tried to make a career of it and the industry was brutal. Maybe you shared it publicly and it was received with indifference. Maybe you compared yourself to someone extraordinary and decided the gap between you and them was an argument against continuing. But failure is not what kills joy. What kills joy is the story you attach to failure. The story that says, "This means something about who I am. This means I am not enough. This means I should not have wanted this at all." That story is armor, and it is so convincing because it feels like wisdom. It feels like realism. It feels like you are finally being honest with yourself about your limitations. But it is not wisdom. It is fear wearing the costume of wisdom, and underneath that fear is something much more raw. You are protecting yourself from hope, because hope requires vulnerability. Hope says, "I want this. I care about this. This matters to me." And caring, truly caring, means you can be hurt. It means the outcome has stakes. It means you have to show up as yourself, unfiltered and unarmored, and stand behind something. And somewhere in your past, that kind of exposure led to pain. And so your nervous system quietly, efficiently, compassionately began to turn down the volume on want itself, on desire, on passion. It thought it was keeping you safe. It was keeping you empty. Stage 5. The role of identity is another layer to this, one that is particularly relevant in the world you are living in right now. At some point, the thing you loved became part of your identity. You were not just someone who painted. You were a painter. You were not just someone who wrote. You were a writer. The activity stopped being a thing you did and became a thing you were. And that shift, while it can feel empowering, carries a hidden weight. Because now, engaging with the activity is not just something you do for pleasure. It is a referendum on who you are. Every time you sit down to write and the words do not come, it is not just a bad writing session. It is evidence about your identity as a writer. Every time you pick up the guitar and your fingers feel clumsy, it is not just a rusty afternoon. It is information about whether you deserve the label. This is what psychologists call identity threat. And it transforms the act of doing the thing from play into performance, from exploration into examination. You cannot be in joy and under examination at the same time. The nervous system does not allow it. Joy requires the self to be temporarily set aside, to dissolve into the experience. Identity threat does the opposite. It amplifies the self. It puts your ego front and center, watching, evaluating, comparing. And so you avoid the thing, not because you do not love it, but because you cannot bear to sit in that examination room anymore. You cannot bear to find out that you are no longer good enough, or that you were never as good as you thought, or that the love has faded, and you do not know what that makes you now. This is one of the deepest, most painful losses a person can experience, and yet almost no one talks about it as the grief that it is. And your nervous system, which has no concept of the internet, experiences all of this as real, immediate social comparison. It registers it as, you are at the bottom of a hierarchy. You are watching from below. The distance between where you are and where you want to be is enormous. And the brain, when faced with enormous distance, does something very predictable. It stops moving. It calls the distance evidence. Evidence that the destination was never meant for you. This is not weakness. This is a feature of your neurology. Your brain is designed to prevent you from wasting energy on goals it calculates as unachievable. When the gap between your current state and your desired state registers as too large, the motivational circuits go quiet. The desire dims. The joy that was supposed to pull you forward starts to feel like a cruel joke. And so you scroll instead. You consume instead of create. You watch other people inhabit the thing you used to love, and you feel something complicated. Something that is part admiration, and part longing, and part a grief you cannot quite name. That complicated feeling is important. It is data. It means the love is still there. Underneath everything, still alive, still sending signals. You have not stopped loving the thing. You have stopped believing you were allowed to love it. Stage 7. The return. So, what actually happens now? This is not the part of the video that gives you a checklist. There is no checklist. This is something more fundamental than that. What needs to happen is a disentanglement, a careful, patient separation of the thing itself from everything the thing has come to mean. From the identity, from the performance, from the comparison, from the childhood wound that made creativity feel dangerous, from the audience, real or imagined, from the outcome. You have to find your way back to the thing before it meant anything, before anyone was watching, before you knew whether you were good at it, before you knew what it was supposed to produce. You have to find your way back to the beginner, not because being a beginner is comfortable. It is not. It is deeply uncomfortable for someone who once felt fluent in something to return to fumbling. But beginners have something that experts often lose. Beginners are doing the thing for the thing, not for the result, not for the audience, not for the identity, just for the raw, unmediated experience of doing. Jung believed that the process of individuation, becoming fully yourself, required periodic returns to the material of your inner life, to the things that felt true before the world told you what true was supposed to look like. Your joy is part of that material. Your creativity is part of that material. Your passion is not decorative. It is not a luxury for when life settles down. It is a core feature of your psychological architecture. And when it is suppressed long enough, you do not just lose the activity, you lose access to a part of yourself. The philosophers called it the authentic life. And they did not mean a life where you follow your dreams in some motivational poster sense. They meant a life in which you are genuinely, courageously in contact with your own interior experience, in which you do not outsource your sense of self to external validation, in which you are willing to feel things fully even when those feelings are uncomfortable. Reclaiming your joy is an act of that courage, not because it will immediately feel good. It will probably feel strange at first, clumsy, self-conscious, maybe a little sad, because returning to something you abandoned often brings up grief for the time away, for the version of yourself who kept going, for what might have been. Let it. Let the strangeness be there. Let the rust be there. Let the gap between what you produce and what you envision be there. Because underneath all of that is something real, something that was never about being good, something that was always about being alive in a particular way that only that thing could access. Stage 8. The final realization here is the shift that everything in this video has been building toward. You did not lose the love. You protected it. In the most human, most understandable, most deeply compassionate way possible. you put the most alive part of yourself somewhere safe. Out of reach of criticism, out of reach of comparison, out of reach of failure. You tucked it away in the part of you that nothing can touch. And it has been waiting there. It has been waiting with the patience that has no impatience in it. Because the truest parts of who we are do not expire. They do not give up. They do not move on. They wait, quietly and without complaint, for the moment when you decide it is finally safe enough to come back. That moment does not have to be perfect. You do not have to have resolved all your relationship with criticism. You do not have to have made peace with comparison. You do not have to have figured out your identity or your worth or your place in any hierarchy. You just have to decide that the aliveness matters more than the armor. That is the whole shift. That one small, enormous decision. The aliveness matters more than the armor. Because here is what the armor costs you. Not just the joy, though it costs you that. It costs you the experience of being fully yourself. Of being in contact with your own interior life. Of knowing, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, that there is something inside you that is genuinely, specifically, irreducibly yours. Without that, you can function. You can be productive. You can be responsible and capable and reasonably fine. But you will feel it. That low-grade hunger. That sense that something is slightly missing, slightly off, slightly not enough, though you cannot point to the exact thing. That is the distance between you and your own aliveness. Closing it is not self-improvement. It is self-return. The thing you used to love is not asking you to be good at it. It is not asking you to share it. It is not asking you to make it mean anything or produce anything or go anywhere in particular. It is asking you the simplest, most radical thing it knows how to ask. It is asking you to come back, not as the person you are trying to become, not as the optimized, productive, validated version of yourself you have been working so hard to construct, as the person who loved it before any of that existed. That person is still you. Underneath everything, behind every mask and every strategy and every carefully constructed presentation of self, they are still in there. They have been in there all along. And the moment you stop performing and start feeling, they will be exactly where you left them. Waiting, patient, still holding the brush, still holding the pen, still holding the instrument, still ready. So I want to ask you something before you go. Not which step to take next, not what technique to try, not which habit to build. I want to ask you this. Which version of the love did you lose first? Was it the moment someone put eyes on it that were not safe? Was it the moment you started measuring yourself against someone extraordinary? Was it the moment the activity became about proving something rather than feeling something? Sit with that, because in that moment, in whatever that specific memory holds, is the exact place where the armor first appeared. And understanding it, really understanding it without judgment and without the need to fix it immediately, is the first true act of reclamation. That is where your joy went. And now, finally, you know how to go get it back. Which truth hit you the hardest?